Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the session on developing common foundations for measuring the impact of businesses, concepts, framework, and approaches. This is a session that has been organized in collaboration with society and organizations, HEC in Paris, and Rodolfo is here actually to represent this group. I'm delighted to be joined today by 4 specialists of this question, plus a very important discussant. So let me introduce the speakers to you first. So the first speaker is going to be Susie Morrissey. She is the principal advisor in the office of the chief economic advisor of the New Zealand Treasury, and Susie is going to talk about the very interesting framework on living standards that has been created by the Treasury and how that is now being connected to what the private sector is doing in New Zealand and maybe doing in other countries of this world. Then we're going to have Rodolfo Durand, who is a professor at HEC Business School, Paris. Then we will have Costanza Consolandi. She is an associate professor of corporate finance in the Department of Business Law at the University of Siena. Then we'll have Hayley Allison-Beer, who is an assistant professor of performance and responsibility at the University of Warwick. And the discussant today is going to be Mr. Cho Dong-soon, who is the president of Incheon National University. So before I actually give the floor to our speakers, I'd like to maybe remind you some of the main sort of highlights from the previous discussion that we just had in the plenary room. So to introduce the session, and of course some of those themes are going to be, I think, taken up by the discussion here, but the purpose of this session is also to actually present to you in more details the work that these 4 speakers in fact have done in the context of a project that the OECD launched. And I think you may have been already presented with sort of the first output of this project. This is a book, it's a compendium, it's a collection of paper around measuring the inputs of business and well-being and sustainability. And Michael Schindler, who is actually the person responsible for this work at the OECD, is in the room. Thanks, Michael, for putting this together and also for organizing this session. So before I go to the speakers, and I realize I've already been a bit too long, let me just again highlight some key sort of facts that were discussed by the speakers in the plenary roundtable. First, the fact that companies that pursue well-being and inclusive growth as business objectives are actually performing really well across a range of indicators. So it's actually obviously very good news. So there is a strong business case. So for instance, things such as employee satisfaction, productivity, and also, so these are high, but also things such as risk-adjusted returns are actually much better for those companies that do this sort of investment. Second, that is very important that companies address adverse impact, so that they do not do any harm, and also enhance the well-being of the workers and the impact on the environment. But measuring actually the positive impact is really difficult because there is no consensus on what good looks like, and that's exactly the topic of this session, how we can actually measure those inputs through sort of a common or unified framework, a set of measures. Then another point about the fact that the fragmentation of the organizational structure of many big companies also make it actually increasingly difficult to measure companies' input. So this is one of the challenges and sort of stumbling blocks, I think, to that harmonization, and maybe some of the speakers will have comments on that. And then I also have a point, in fact, by Rodolphe, which I think is a point that we very much supported and liked. That's why we are kind of putting to you again in this room, which is about the fact that it would be important for companies actually to move from corporate social responsibility to corporate political responsibilities. So companies need to perform well across SDGs indicators, CSR metrics, but also they should stop lobbying at maintaining the negative externalities of their actions. So we'll see whether this, again, is something that you are interested to discuss again. With that, let me give the floor to Susie for the first presentation. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Kia ora koutou. Hello everybody, it's nice to see you all. Congratulations on making the last sessions of the day, that's most impressive. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about Treasury's Living Standards Framework, so the Wellbeing Framework that the Ministry of Finance, the Treasury in New Zealand has devised. I'm going to talk about how it's being used in the public sector in New Zealand. And then I'm going to link it through to how business is thinking about wellbeing and how they might use what we're doing with our framework in some way. And the link I'm going to make there is through the International Integrated Reporting Council, IR, the Integrated Reporting Framework. And then we'll just consider a little bit more about how the Living Standards Framework may help business. And because this is new work and a work in progress very much, I'll talk about some of the challenges that we're facing. So to start, let me tell you about the Living Standards Framework, Treasury's Living Standards Framework. So our wellbeing framework is in 3 parts. It draws very much on work that the OECD has done, but you'll be able to see some links through to the Integrating Reporting Framework if you're familiar with that as well. So to start, we can see that we have current wellbeing, future wellbeing, and in small writing off to the side, you can see issues of distribution and risk and resilience. So if we look firstly at this, we'll see that, okay, so this has come from OECD. So we're thinking largely about what government's role is, and in thinking very much drawing on a sort of capabilities piece, thinking about freedoms and capabilities of citizens, of households, of families, and of communities largely. And we're thinking about how they're living now and how they're positioned to live in the future. So we're thinking about whether they're able to live the life that they want to lead and what they might need if they don't already have that. So those current wellbeing in the grey box at the top, many of you will recognise those as domains of current wellbeing from the OECD's Better Life Index. There is an additional one that we've included for New Zealand of cultural identity. That allows us to include issues that relate to us and our country in particular. So the things that speak to our culture, the different ethnicities within our culture, whereas we are a bicultural society with the people who first lived in New Zealand and then the settlers who came later. So we've included this additional element so that we can capture issues that relate to that. Then we've got future wellbeing. So how are we positioned to live in the future? From an economic perspective, we would call this capital stock from which we can draw down flows of wellbeing. We think of these very much in accounting concepts, going back to the accounting framework of integrated reporting. So we think about these as assets, if you like, that everything can be put into one of these 4 areas. Now, there might be some differences of philosophical differences about what should go where and whether you should need more than this, but we try to be very practical and pragmatic in our approach and just say that we're going to use these 4 and kind of have quite broad definitions within some of those. So natural capital, you can probably picture all of those, the things that represents, so includes things like biodiversity and the air and water. Human capital is the personal embodied wellbeing, so that's about health and education and skills of a person. And then we have financial and physical capital, for which we use a really large definition, and we put intangible assets and innovation and things like that in there. And then we have social capital, which some people find tricky, but we've heard lots and lots of talk over the last few days about trust, and trust very much sits there in social capital. Trust between individuals and between individuals and their state. So institutions. So those are those capitals. And we have risk and resilience, which speaks to how strong the capital stocks are. Are you well placed to deal with shocks, internal and external? Are you resilient? Would you survive some sort of impact? So that could be unemployment in a personal sense, or it could be a GFC in a national sense. So those are the futures. Those are future well-beings, and we think very much about their sustainability, of growing those in a sustainable way. And we think also about distribution, we'll see there. So that means growing those in a sustainable way for everybody. So looking at outcomes for different groups of people within a society. So that's distribution. So the Living Standards Framework, what we do with it, so now you know what it is a little bit, so what do we do with it? So we use it to analyse policy, and we give advice using this framework, talking about which of the capitals or which of the domains are positively or negatively impacted by a policy that you could do. And we also measure using that. So we are releasing a dashboard in December where we will have indicators for each of those current wellbeing domains and each of those capitals. So then we can measure wellbeing, thinking of that. Now, the dashboard is something that we hope business will use. So it's designed primarily for the use of Treasury. As I said, it's our framework, but we know other agencies, other ministries will be interested. But here we see a link to business. Here we see an opportunity for business to see the impact of the things that they are doing, and whether that is growing in terms of financial and physical capital, whether that is training their staff and helping them grow their own human capital, or thinking about the impacts on the environment. So this is one of the dashboard is one of the links that we make to business. We would expect lots of academic interest, of course, but this will reveal, this will start to give an indication of where government action might be coming, where regulation might come, for example, if you can see trends that are happening. So that's where that's one of the places where we'd start to see it. So, the public sector, I said that this is Treasuries, but other people starting to use this. So, the framework, because it looks at all of these different dimensions and wants to make the connections and understand the impact between all of these dimensions, it very much forces ministries to work with each other. So, I'm sure in all of your countries, education is one area and health is another area, and this framework starts to link the impacts of the environment on health and education on training, and so it forces people to work together in a way that perhaps you haven't always done in the past. It also, and we've heard lots about this, it is essentially a GDP plus framework, right? So it continues to look at things like material income of its individuals and how they are looking nationally, but it goes beyond that. So it's very much a GDP plus type of system. So if we think about how this works within the public sector, I'm going to give you this slide and then I'm going to give you one for the private sector. So this slide kind of shows the role of what Treasury is doing, which is obviously at the most macroeconomic level, given that we're a Treasury and a Ministry of Finance, so we're looking across the whole of the nation at a very highest of levels. And then there are different levels of public sector engagement at the meso and the micro level, where you start to get down to individual people and their immediate connections through policy. So that just kind of gives you the connection of all of the different layers that are needed to go into all of the different depth that is needed for different people. And as I say, in a minute we'll look at this from a business perspective. But as I said, we've got the integrating reporting framework, and this is an opportunity. This is some mechanism that businesses can use to start to report what they're doing in a broader sense. So thinking about the panel session that we were just at. So thinking about the panel session we were just at, that was explaining how we've got this broader sense of reporting that's starting to happen, non-financial reporting that's starting to happen, and we're talking about how that might expand in the future. The integrated reporting framework, as some of you might know, uses a capital structure to do that reporting. So very similar to using the Living Standards framework. They do have 6 capitals and we have 4, but nevertheless, it's that sense of using this as a structure to report one's activities, an organisation's activities. So this is a potential way of doing it. They're quite linked, they're both models of production. It's just that in a firm environment, Generally, the idea is that you're producing income and value for shareholders and profit, and we're producing well-being, but the idea of inputs and function and outputs and outcomes, similar to both, so we quite like those. One of the other links, I suppose, is the idea of if more companies were doing this kind of non-financial reporting, that helps that understanding of what's going on in your society, and that links us very much into social capital, into building that trust. So, as I said, we've heard a lot about that today. So more companies that are doing more transparency and more explicit focus on activities beyond their immediate profit, legitimate profit motive, kind of would I would suggest build some of that trust, increase that trust within society. That because from both their actions, but also their ability to talk about their actions. So if I was going to summarise the abilities or the benefits that I think could come from using our framework or IR framework for this, I mean, we've got this. It's very robust. Obviously, it's built on the OECD work. It's very clear. It can give a guide as to what is likely to happen, whether it's from spending or non-spending regulation. It gives you an idea of what governments might do. Therefore, that helps businesses plan and consider what they want to do, whether that's in response or ahead of change. It certainly helps with this rise in, as we were saying, we're way beyond CSR now, so it very much helps us and helps business get through into this space of connecting in a way that their stakeholders now expect. In that, whether it's ethical investment, ethical trading. It kind of helps them paint that picture of what they're doing. I think that it's this idea of all of our actions all have an impact. Using this framework, it gives you the terminology, the consistency, the language to talk about the impact that business is having in the same way that we can talk about individuals and the state as a whole. And now if I put that picture back up again from a business perspective, we can see that we've got these very large kind of macro level frameworks, and then we can see, okay, we've got a national level of what we might be able to use and how we might be able to think, and then we've got, say, an industry level or a sector level way of thinking, and there are regulations or organisations, structures within there at that level, and then all the way down to the firm level, to the very micro level, where we can see, training of individual employees, increasing their human capital, deciding who it is that you're going to take on as employees, including, for example, people that have come out of prison, and so just really contributing in a different way. So this is kind of how we think it can help businesses think more about what they're doing, provide a structure to talk about what they're doing, and contribute to the economy overall. So I should wrap up and hand over to my colleagues here on the panel. So suffice to say that, of course, none of this is easy, none of this is straightforward. Some of you might have heard me talking about the Living Standards Framework. Whilst we don't claim that we have all of the answers, we just claim that we think this is a really useful start. So lots of things that we might need to still do as a Treasury to continue to work on our framework. Don't need to talk about data gaps to this audience, you would understand that. So we are thinking very much about what we are currently measuring, what we're going to start measuring in the dashboard, and looking forward to the dialogue of what we need to continue to measure to go forward. We know that what we measure is what counts, right? So we'll continue to think about that. Thank you.
Yes, please, Frodo.
Hi everyone. Hope you are not too tired. So I'm Rodolphe Durand, as was said, and I am the founder and the academic director of the Society and Organization Center at HEC Paris. HEC Paris is a business school And we are lucky to have lots of alumni who are well positioned in some multinational corporations. And so that means that within this center, I have the opportunity to talk to CEOs of 5 companies that, if you put them together, represent 1 million employees worldwide. So, and 400 billion capitalism market cap. And these people, when you talk about, CSR, well-being, all these firms are listed. And so the question they ask me, and actually we try to answer together, is why would a firm actually really invest in these different things? What is the business rationality? As a business school professor, I like to say that business is business, but business is not just business. Business is more than that. And so, therefore, I think that to deal with the dramatic issues that we are confronted with, climatic change, inequality in wealth inequalities, depletion of natural resources, water, clean water, etc., we really need to take into consideration what businesses can bring to the table, not just in terms of competencies, but as well just as thinking of the mere impact of what they do. 5 firms, 1 million people, we talked about Samsung before, 450 employees, just the company, more 1.5 million, said Pierre Abart just before. So, one company, few companies can have a really dramatic impact. So, of course, we have some evidence that employee productivity increases, that innovation increases, that clients are willing just to pay more for products that come from firms that do respect their employees and have environmental policies. But is this enough? So when I talk to these people, to Emmanuel Faber, CEO of Danone, or Denis Machuel, CEO of Sodexo, just to cite them both, they say, we have people who do actually fill in reports for integrated reporting or non-financial reportings, but this is very taxing. We don't have all the information, or sometimes actually we need to produce the same information but in different manner. So it's very difficult. Multiple frames of non-financial performance measurement exist, but they are not so compatible. You have lots of issues related to this. So here is the scholar, the academic that is speaking. Why do you have just to use this type of metrics? The theorization behind it is not super clear for business leaders, for policymakers, for international organizations like OECD, even for scholars like me. I would say yes, but we understand why. But for a business person, not so clear. The validity of each of these constructs or concepts is quite poor. Some measure it in a way, others measure it in a different way. Across different ratings and evaluators, the external validity is not present either. The indicators lack independence. So SDGs, pretty good, but the thing is that 17 SDGs, they are all correlated. Maybe not all correlated, but if you take employment or life conditions, well, they are created with other indicators of well-being. If you think of infrastructure, SDG number 9, well, actually it provides better means to get an employment, and so they are also correlated. So the thing is that when you really want to measure an impact, you want to disaggregate the different cause and effect relationships. With SDGs, you can't really do that. Economists or scholars say that they are endogenous. You cannot separate the exogenous from the endogenous factors. In the studies that companies report or business consulting firms report, it's often case the fact that actually you have selection bias. So you just observe what you can observe, and you don't go the extra mile just to try to find things that actually will not actually meet the different requirements, and it's what we call selection bias, etc. So lots of issues related to this. At the same time, we should not, be completely without hope. What I show you, and that you cannot really see very well here, is a Bloomberg terminal. So that means the Bloomberg terminal that investors use to invest in companies. Well, I know that only maybe less than 5% of the investors use this, but this exists. So in the red square, you don't see it. This is for IBM, but actually it's the Robeco-Sam ranking for IBM. It's ranked 69. And the little graphs that you see on the upper left part are actually the evolution of some of the criteria, such as women employees percentage, it's growing, but another one is women in the board of directors is decreasing. And so that means that actually investors can really start having a sense of what's going on within the firm and take bets, invest if they want so, use this criteria and not just the performance criteria to make their investments. So, there is no commensurability, there is endogeneity, there is correlational problem, but at the same time, some companies try to provide services for investors to really actually understand what's going on related to well-being and environmental concerns. So, in this short paper, what we wanted to say with Magali Delmas, my co-author from UCLA, we wanted to say that actually we need to connect two different logics. The one which is the economic or accounting logic, which is based on materiality, so proving evidence and facts that actually investors can use, with the political one. I just noted here the definition of materiality because I think it's an interesting exercise just to read it and understand it. Materiality, so information is material if omitting or misstating it could influence decisions that users make on the basis of the financial information of a specific reporting entity. This is from the US Accounting Association. So, and this is materiality from an accounting perspective that has been extended to non-financial criteria. So that would mean that in absence of an information that is material, such as treatment, child labor, or women condition in your company or in your supply chain, would you have invested the same way in this company had you known that actually you had child labor or mistreatment of women in your company or in your suppliers? So that's what actually lots of people, and actually the next paper also, will try to do by integrating concretely actually some of these SDGs, which are the political factors, the political logic, with the actually material information. And now it becomes to be interesting for my CEOs to whom I talk, because then I can show that, think that if you have some information that actually investors would have, that they will invest more in your company, well, actually this will make your stock increase. And so you need to do a good job in terms of transparency, in terms of accountability and reliability, to provide a case for them to invest in your company and showing the impact that your policies have. So in this paper, what we try to do is say, hey, if you just say to a CEO and to a board, you should, fight against climatic change, or you should fight against air pollution, or you should fight against water contamination, etc., etc. The person, put yourself in his or her shoes. I mean, what can I do? This is too big for me. I can reduce a bit the consumption in terms of plastics. I can do a little bit of this. It's too big for me. It's salient in my mind, but my everyday job is just to create bottom line impacts more than any other thing. This is my mandate. So what we say here is that just to try to reconcile the political and the actually economic or accounting logic, we should have maybe we could use knowledge we have from psychology and should take the goals, the SDG, so the G standing for goals, seriously. And we're making a pun here, being smart, which is actually an acronym that the psychologists have used. When you want to fix some objectives to people, some goals to people, these objectives should be SMART, meaning specific and measurable, attainable. If they are not attainable, they will cheat, basically. So they will greenwash, for instance, or social wash. Relevant, pertinent for the actors. If they are too abstract, well, they won't do it. And timely. And so basically, perhaps we could use this knowledge from psychology in order to reconcile, the two logics and provide SMART goals to reach impact. And this is a quote from the paper: including a materiality analysis in defining SMART goals helps reach the political agenda of SDGs by having salient and achievable objectives in relation with the firm's resource uses, cost benefits. This is a paper that actually we co-signed with Olga Owen from University of North Carolina and Ioannis Ioannou from LBS. That is forthcoming in Academy of Management Review, which exactly says this. So the salience of an issue needs to be achievable, attainable, and be put in consideration in relationship with actually the usage you can have of your assets or resources, and thinking that you may have actually a benefit, meaning that the materiality will be effective for investors. And so at the end of the paper, we say that basically maybe we could reconcile these different logics. They are different, but they aim for the same objective by having, the stakeholder materiality map, some SMART goals in connection with, and this is the role of OECD and other institutions, intergovernmental organizations, government, and perhaps the research community, so just to move toward the standardized metrics at the sectoral and the country level, so that we can have evaluation and review on a continuous basis every year or 2 years maybe, if we have a large community to help us doing this. And this is basically kind of a pathway to measuring actually business impact on well-being at the same time as satisfying the investors in these firms. Thank you.
Thank you, Rudolf. Our next speaker is Costanza.
Good evening, everybody, and it is really a pleasure to be here. So, thanks, Rodolphe, for your presentation, because it gives me the opportunity to let's say to analyze a part. So indeed, my paper focuses on one aspect of Rodolphe's excellent paper that I invite you to read. The title of my presentation is Doing Well by Doing Good, the relationship between investor materiality and the SDGs. So indeed, this research had a very ambitious goal. And the goal was answer the long-standing question, can a company do well by doing good? Usually the answer is, it depends. But then we said, okay, we have the SDGs. SDGs are about impact. SDGs are an important framework. SDGs were not created for companies or for investors. They were created for policy purposes. They were created for governments. But they are essential to, they tell us that we must do something. There are goals that must be achieved by 2030. And after this, what happens? And, as Rodolphe says, the climate issues, the social issues, and inequality. So companies and investors are summoned to act and to do something. On the other side, we know that there are some non-financial components, some non-financial elements of a company, the so-called ESG, environmental social governance, that are material for a company. And material, the concept of materiality we will use here is materiality for investors. And we say that an ESG issue is material for investors if it affects one or more value drivers, so it has an impact on financial performance. So we have these two components, SDGs, which are about impact, ESG, material issues that are linked to financial performance. So we said, okay, if we can link SDGs to ESG material issues, we can link financial performance to impact, and so have an alignment of the goals. So do well by doing good. This was our ambitious research questions. And which was the research background we had? First of all, the role of the private sectors on the achievement of the SDGs. We know that, as I said before, SDGs are ambitious, they are not creative for the private sector, but we also know that without the private sector, SDGs cannot be achieved. The estimation said that more than a half of the money, the resources needed to finance the SDGs must come from the private sector. This is one point. The other point is SDGs represent a new risk framework. They represent a wake-up call for companies and investors. Let's consider the very recent report about climate, which has been released a few days ago in the US, even if somebody says that doesn't believe in it. But anyway, what happens? The climate report says that if we do not face climate issues, besides the problems for the planet or for society, this will represent a huge cost for companies. So and SDGs are a business opportunities also for companies. And the other point is, does it exist in impact measures? So when we measure the impact, we need information which are outside the company. We do not have information inside the company. So we have some information which are indexes like the SDG index provided by the UN Sustainable Development Solution Network, or the measures which are inside the company like SDG prioritization, or PricewaterhouseCoopers, or we have KPMG, or we have Ernst Young, but they are, let's say, not synthetic measures. And the other pillar of our research background is the role and the impact of ESG material issues on financial performance. So does materiality matter? It is real. So there is evidence in literature, even if it's not a wide evidence, about the impact on ESG materiality on financial performance. There is the first paper by George Serafim and Mozaffar Khan and Aaron Yu shows that companies performing better on material issues overperform financially those companies that perform worst on material issues. But what is important is that companies that perform well and better on ESG, no material issues, do not overperform. So materiality matters. So what did we do? So we used as I said, materiality map of SASB. For those of you which are not familiar with SASB and SASB materiality map, very quickly, SASB, which is the acronym for Sustainability Accounting Standard Board, is a non-profit organization based in San Francisco that, with the purpose to identify ESG issues that are material for each industry, as materiality varies across industry, of course. So they classify 30 ESG issues in 79 industries grouped in 10 sectors. Then I will tell something about that. But so for each industry, we can see which are the material ESG issues. So those issues that impact financial performance. So what did we do? We said, okay, these are the 30 issues of SASB, ESG issues. We have the SDGs, 17. Indeed, we use only 16 as SDGs. We excluded as SDG 17. SDGs, 17 SDGs, 169 targets. So what we did was to map each SASB issues to each SDG and the targets. So to see if there is a link. And on the basis of this mapping, we calculated two sets of indexes. One set of indexes that measure the ability of SASB's issues to impact the SDGs and the targets, and the relevance of the SDGs and the targets to impact for the SASB issues. And then we measured also industry-specific indexes. So these are the indexes, but you can find in the paper just to show you that we work a lot. Which are the main findings we had? The main findings, first of all SASB issues impact at least one SDG and the target. So it means that SASB issues, ESG issues are relevant to the SDGs. All SDGs and more than 80% of targets are impacted by at least one SASB issues. But what is interesting is that when a single SDG is impacted by two or more SASB issues, it is impacted with a different intensity. So the number of targets impacted is different. Take, for example, SDG 7. SDG 7 has 3 targets. Supply chain management impacts all 3 targets. Greenhouse emission, 2 out of 3. Access and affordability, this issue, only 1. Okay, so the impact relevance is different. I do not have much time. I'm sorry, I always, but one thing I would like you to show. This is the most interesting slide, and I know that the PowerPoint will be uploaded on the website. So when we calculated the indices at the sector and industry level, and we could, we calculated an index which measured the impactability of the industry to impact a given SDG, a given target, or the overall SDGs. We do not provide an impact measure. So we measure the ability of the industry and therefore the ability of the company operating in that industry to impact a given SDG and measure. So if we consider all the SDGs, so the overall SDGs, the average of the impact on all SDGs, and at a sector level, the sector rankings is interesting. So we have, if you see on your left, the sector with the highest impact, the first graph, is the healthcare sector. And then we have no renewable resources and so on, and financials is the last one. When we decided to split the food and beverage from the consumption sector, so we split the consumption sector in food and beverage related industries from the others, you can see that the food and beverage is the most important sector in achieving the SDGs. Second, the healthcare. And this was a great result for us. Food, health, the two pillars of well-being, because it's something that is necessary for society. I would like you also, I will invite you also to notice which is the sector with the lowest score index is the financial sector. It is strange. The financial sector is the leverages the impact of all the other industries, banking, borrowing money to companies investing in renewable energies and so on. But here our methodology evaluates the impact of the financial sector as a firm. Okay, so the environmental impact that a bank might have if it puts solar panels on its roof. Okay, so it doesn't consider the indirect impact, because financial sectors might be excluded, also be excluded. It is a peculiarity here. So which are the next steps of our research? So this is a general framework. We started applying the general framework. We started to talk with companies and investors. We have in our pipeline, well, one first thing, SASB recently disclosed the codified standards. So SASB changed a bit the number of issues, the materiality map, so we have to, let's say, adjust and update the mapping. We will do a more granular mapping, and another thing we're going to do, as Rudolf said, SDGs are correlated. In some cases, there is negative correlation, but what is important is that there are SDGs that, let's say, think about the environment, okay? So almost all the SDGs and some targets are linked to the SDGs environment. So we will improve our mapping, also considering this correlation. And we would like to do a user-friendly tool of this framework. And we are in our pipeline. There is now a project and a paper. We're working on a paper with the UN Pension Fund applying the framework, and I could say that working with the UN Pension Fund on SDGs and this framework is the 18th goal, because it's great. And of course, we are particularly interested in how to measure impact. One last thing about what Rodolphe said. As I said, this methodology doesn't provide an impact measure, so the quality of the impact is embedded in the ESG score, okay, environmental social score. And this is also weaknesses of this model, because we know, and there is a paper which is not recent, but Rodolphe is among one of the authors, that we must be very careful when we use ESG data, because there's no correlation. If I pick an ESG score for the same company from Sustainalytics and from Robicosan, they have different scores. So this is one problem. So we rely on the ESG data. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hayley, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the other panel speakers, as well as to the OECD and HEC Paris for organizing these slightly more academic sessions. It's a delight to be here today, and it's been very inspirational listening to the talks about the future of well-being, especially as I wait for my first little one. It's inspirational to hear what nations and academics are doing to develop this space. I certainly agree with a lot of the points made over the last couple days and in this session about the need to rethink measurement processes, perhaps, and the purpose and role of measurement at government level, but especially at the micro level. And then certainly also how we can include more stakeholders into that process. And I think it was Princess Laurentine that said about how we can recognize and embed real people and real conditions into our measurement processes. And so I'd like to take a little bit of time to talk to you about my work, which really looks at how we can think about not just measurement as an activity of describing something like well-being, but measurement as an activity of creating intelligibility or understanding, comprehending subjects. And for that, it's not just about those doing the measuring, but those being measured. In order to do that, I'm going to look at measurement in a different way. And so when we talk about the challenges of measurement, and as many have been outlined here today and just in this session, there's still a lot of outstanding, what I would call technical aspects of measures. So the validity and robustness and comparability of the measures that we use. And important work has made great headway in this space, exemplified in guidelines like the OECD's Subjective Wellbeing Report. But I would like to raise another important challenge related to measurement, that of the social aspects of measurement. And by the social, I mean the behavioral and cultural interpretive responses experienced or created by specific measures and their frameworks, and then what this means for the decisions and actions that can be taken from those measures. If we think for a moment about the measurement process itself, we can identify the fact that at various stages we do need to make technical considerations, so identifying what we're going to measure, designing measures that are valid and robust to capture information on that, collecting the information, analyzing it, and using it. But equally so, I would like to say at each stage of the process, there's the opportunity to consider the social side. And so how are people using this information? What are they analyzing? How does it engender understanding and action and behaviors, not just for statisticians and policymakers and academics, but also for citizens and customers and students that we hope to impact? And I would say that this is especially important if we think about what we know about the purposes and effects of measurement. And so ideally, measurement creates strategic alignment and communication and coordination. It creates motivation and empowerment to act towards a cause across shared entities and stakeholders. And we know that this can lead to improved performance on things like well-being for individual teams and organizations. However, what we know less about is why sometimes these effects are positive and sometimes they're negative. And what I mean by negative is the fact that, yes, we still have greenwashing or impact washing on the back of the use of these SDG frameworks, and this, oh, it jumped ahead of me. And so if we really want to understand and make sure that our well-being measures and frameworks drive positive behaviors and not negative behaviors, my recommendation is that we also have to consider the social aspects. And in order to do that, we also have to question some of the assumptions that we hold about measurement. And so I just want to put it over to you for a second to think about what is the word that fills in the blank of this sentence. And so I can say that having done this in multiple settings, most people are thinking measurement, but in fact, it's consciousness. And why I use this is because it really starts to show that over time, we've assumed and become emboldened with the assumption that measurement does in fact guide appropriate actions and behaviors and decisions. It regulates how we behave. But in fact, most of what we've designed when it comes to measurement and what we consider has to do with how statisticians and academics or scholars or policymakers make their decisions and regulate their actions and behaviors. But we don't necessarily think about the people all along the process of measurement. And often those that design the measures or analyze the measures are not the same as the people that have to collect the information. And so if we think about the fact that it is people with their consciousness, with their ability to think and act and behave, that we're measuring, that are being measured, that we hope to improve the well-being of, then we can start to say, what can we do to help them use the information that we collect, gain knowledge, gain intelligibility about well-being? And if we consider for a second what we know about well-being inside organizations, I'm an organization scholar, so I picked up on the well-being research from this space. What we know is that most well-being activities, from yoga to mindfulness to gratitude lists, have a positive effect. So it leads to better life satisfaction, it leads to better presenteeism inside organizations. But over time, unhealthy patterns reemerge. So people stop exercising, they return to unhealthy eating habits. And for a certain demographic, those that are unreceptive in the first place, well-being hardly ever changes for them. And so for those people that are resistant to any kind of intervention, they don't get much of the benefit. So what does this mean, really? Well, we don't understand well-being at an individual level very well. We don't understand what compels people to engage in better well-being activity or to sustain that activity. And in a way, we don't know how to help individuals understand and act upon their own well-being better. And I would argue that if we can think of the measurement frameworks we put in place across our organizations, across our societies, that we can start to consider whether or not people do in fact understand their well-being better and how we can help them achieve that. And so I would suggest that we need to think about measurement not just as an action of describing and expressing information, especially about concepts like well-being, but that we need to consider how it purposely creates intelligibility or understanding of well-being. And for that, I would say that we have to add a step to the measurement processes that we discuss and design across our institutions to include an aspect of it which looks at how we elicit understanding of well-being. So when you're measuring citizens and consumers and students, are you helping them to think about their well-being? Are you helping them to reconsider their behaviors and actions and what they could do differently? Or are you just collecting information about them? And so I'm going to use two examples from existing frameworks. I chose these completely out of my own will, and so I'm not in a long-term study with them. I am applying my mode of analysis to their frameworks. But it's to highlight that we can start to think about critically the social aspects of measurement frameworks in order to understand how intelligibility is being created for people at all levels of society. And so I'm going to start with the United Kingdom's personal well-being scale. So this is a national level survey that's gone out for several years now, which the government uses to monitor well-being by asking 4 questions to its citizens about how satisfied they are with their life, how worthwhile they feel is their life, and whether they were happy or anxious yesterday on a scale of 1 to 10. And so arguably this is rendering well-being intelligible for statisticians and academics and policymakers because it provides knowledge about trends over time in regions, low levels and high levels of well-being, and it allows them to distribute national resources and new policies perhaps. And this is very important, and I am not in any way suggesting that this type of work should stop. I do believe in this type of work, but what I will suggest is that this type of initiative on behalf of a government is not helping everyday citizens understand their own well-being. And I don't know about many of you, but certainly within my broader circle of people outside academia, I do not know anybody that's going to check on these databases, even if they're made publicly available. And so this information is not of use to the everyday citizen. And so on another slant, and I want to highlight here that this example is really about a measurement process and not just the fact of an indicator of well-being. And so I'm going to use an example going on at an organization that I find exemplary, and I'm going to talk about GSK's Partnership for Prevention program. And what GSK has done is they've designed a comprehensive package for their employees that covers health services that are both alternative and traditional. It's health and well-being services, so everything from massage to yoga to medical treatment. And they offer it to all their employees in over 150 countries and their families. And what they do to track progress on health and well-being in this space is they look at country characteristics, employee characteristics, risks that existed already. But then they look at the workplace interventions that are selected as well as the engagement. So how aware and satisfied and participatory are employees in the different range of services. And they supplant this with qualitative information which describes the experiences employees and their families are having. And why this is really powerful is because while it's measuring success in creating health and well-being, it's creating intelligibility about well-being, not just for GSK, but for employees and their families. And it's doing this because it's creating knowledge of preferences for certain health activities. It's able to say what's worked or not worked over time. It gives individuals choice about what they can then choose instead, and an ability to look back about whether this worked or what else could be needed. And so here, the ability to act, the ability to behave, the ability to decide about well-being is not just in the hands of the organization, but it's in the hands of the individuals. And so rethinking any measurement framework in some regard about the way that it creates intelligibility and action and decisions and behaviors for people all along this measurement process is one way that we can start to have a conversation, in my opinion, about how to improve well-being. And so just to leave you with a few common foundations, the biggest implication of my presentation, I would say, is that in order to measure well-being in moving forward in a productive and more efficient manner, we need to also consider the social aspects. And so as much as we're considering whether or not frameworks exist that organizations can adopt and utilize to talk about well-being, we should also be actively considering which measures exist at different levels to help entities and individuals understand and act upon their own well-being. And so measurement framework shouldn't just be about describing well-being, but it should be about creating information which enables individuals to reflect upon and understand their own well-being, at an organizational level to adopt and implement effective well-being programs, and at a nation level to understand really the barriers, the strengths, the weaknesses across their nation. I do believe we fundamentally try to achieve these things, but that we fall short because we're not always considering how, to what extent we can involve people in the use and dispersion of this information and knowledge that we create about well-being. And so therefore I would like to put a call to academics and policymakers in this space to also not just consider the technical validity. How can we compare? How can we measure and discuss well-being with measures? But also, how can we look at the processes so that we can reimagine people's roles in creating, collecting, analyzing, and applying the information derived from them? I think there's some great work going on in this space already, like what Susie was talking about in New Zealand, and also what Anat was discussing is going on at Be Better. And so there is some organizations already starting to use the information, and it was highlighted to begin the roundtable as well. The next step really is about what we do with the information we collect, and I would fundamentally say that part of that use really does have to consider everyday people. And so in order to do that and to also encourage institutions responsible for designing and implementing frameworks, we need to also be encouraging them to include statements about how the measurement information they collect is used, how it purposely involves people, and what are the implications for well-being. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we give the floor to Dong Sung, who is going to actually comment upon all the presentations. So you're going to have a really hard job to provide your insights and feedback on all what we just heard. Please speak English.
Well, thank you very much. And my role is not a commentator. My role is a discussant. I don't know the difference between commentator and discussant, but obviously I'm not supposed to make any criticism or comments or anything. Perhaps I can have some good words to all of you. And how am I supposed to play my role? Well, I talked with Professor Beer, and she told me that it is her first time to have this kind of conference. Actually, I've been in academia for 41 years. But actually, it is my first time to have this kind of conference because in this, here we have 4 speakers and 1 discussant. This is quite a rare combination. And so rather than making discussion on each of these 4 speeches, I decided to have some common so to find a common ground, that is where these 4 speakers, all of the 4 speakers have made presentations on. And among so many good words and nice theory and framework and so on, I noticed that there are 2 words that all of the speakers have made. One is well-being, the second one is sustainability. And then many of you made some comments on measurement and so on. But I will use these 2 words, well-being and I will start with well-being and finish with sustainability. I hope that this satisfies your appetite. So here we have well-beings. Actually, I made this while I was listening to them, so some of them may be sort of not complete. But well-being. What is well-being? We have been talking about well-being as we moved into the 21st century. But before we talked about this well-being, there were some similar words. Actually, I used the term new tribe. What this new tribe is a kind of new trend represented by some group of people. Well, would you please? Okay. Yes, I will do it. So, what is so I consider well-being a kind of group of people, new tribe, that try to live their lives in this manner. And, oops, again. Would you please keep it? 그대로 놔둘래요? 제가 취할게요. 아까 나왔던 거 그대로. 아까 웰빙 나왔던 그건데. So well-being is a kind of new trend, but has it been there for the last 100 years? Probably not. Then what are the words that represented each decade or so, if the current decade has been represented by this keyword well-being, then what would it be? 아까 거 맞았었는데 그대로 놔두시면 되는데. Sorry. Can you guess the word that represented the 1990s, about 10, 20 years ago? Okay, yes. And my choice of the word was, can I use this? Okay. Bobos, bourgeois bohemians in the 1990s. And then 10 years before, think, double income, no kids, represented 1980s. And then what represented 1970s? Yuppies, young urban professionals. And then in the 1960s, what else than hippies, right? And then in the 1950s, Beat generation, beatnik, represented by Beatles. So indeed, there's a kind of trend. And I believe that well-being is a kind of current phenomenon, and that is what probably we should observe. And we should be we should satisfy those who prefer this way of life. Certainly, safest, crimelessness is very important. And just for your own sake, I'm going to give you one information. That is, among all the cities in the world, do you know which city is the safest? It is Incheon. Incheon is chosen as the safest city in the world. And so, while you're here in the next few days, you can be assured to be safe. So this is one of the characteristics. But indeed, in business, my major is business administration. And when we're talking about this well-being or kind of current trend in business administration, sustainability is very important. And you might notice that there's a keyword called CSV, creating shared value, that will enable the company to sustain their corporate life. Only when the company pursues not only corporate objective, such as profit maximization and return on investment and so on, but also social objective of the objective of the society in which these companies do business. And one of the examples of such creating shared value is this one, Unilever, British company. And this company has produced a soap called Lifebuoy in India at a price about 1/10 of a typical soap. And using this soap, which is sold at about 1/10 of a price of ordinary soap, Unilever does business well in India, but at the same time, Indian poor young Indian people can have a certain hygienic standard. It's what they claim to do social service while doing business themselves. And there are numerous cases of such project-based creating shared value. But then I had an episode some years ago when I was in India and made some presentation. I used this case to Indian government officers. And then one of the officers raised hand and shouted that, please do not use this example again. And he said, India is not that poor as to having to rely on such soap as Lifebuoy by Unilever. They are sort of furious that they are using India as a kind of an example of showing their social responsibility, which they reject. He said, if Unilever really wants to do social service, they should change their existing businesses rather than coming to India and does a small business and arguing that it is what they do. And indeed, I was shocked. And I thought twice and three times and realized that perhaps this is not the way what global organizations, global companies should be doing to promote or to pursue creating shared value. And then I thought the following way, that is, rather than Project CSV, perhaps we should change the process rather than developing some project. So what this process CSV that I have developed myself was as follows. Take, for example, in Korea, there is a group of companies called CJ Group, which is in many different fields, and such as Digital Oasis, Virtual Simulator, Hello Vision, so on and on. And I really advise them that if they really want to do social service as well as trying to pursue their corporate objective, in other words, if they want to do creating shared value, then they should change evaluation criteria as follows. That is, usually any corporations would use payback period, return on investment, and internal rate of return when they allocate resources. But I asked that they should add such criteria as job creation, social cultural effects, protection of ecosystem, and then so on. So if they put together the scores into a total score, and if they allocate the budget accordingly, then in all of their businesses, they are indeed pursuing corporate objective represented by the first three criteria, and then social objective represented by these four following criteria. And indeed, I'm now at International University, and I'm exercising what I have been preaching. So indeed, at our school, we have many projects at the college and research institutes, such as recruiting international students, collaboration with overseas universities, global branch campuses, focused research university, and so on and on. These are the projects that we have to allocate resources, budget. And the kind of criteria that we are using at International University is research output important, and then educational output, very important, startup and employment for graduates of a school. We try to let our students to start their own businesses as well as to get employment, which is very important for us. We have to enhance our reputation. These are sort of university objectives. At the same time, we want to help our society by creating more jobs. We want to help our society by being innovative and creative. We want to help our society, our city, through some contribution. We want to help our nation through national contribution. We want to help the globe through environmental protection and so on. And then we'll add them all and make total score, and then allocate budget accordingly. So this is the kind of model that we're using. This way, I believe that we are, for each of these projects, we pursue sustainability. But through this framework, I believe we do one more thing. That is, from each of these projects, we try sustainability. But through this process CSV, we try sustainability of sustainability. So each project is trying to make our society sustainable by having this process as our routine. We can make our sustainability effort sustainable. So I end my discussion with sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing with us these few experiences, in particular the last one I think is really interesting. I have myself a lot of questions actually for the speakers, but let me see if there are people in the room that want to go first, maybe. Yes, please.
I forgot the name of the speaker, but I have a question about SASB framework, ESG, materiality, and financial performance. So I first am not quite understanding the relationship between ESG, materiality, and financial performance. And in the total view of the framework, are you, or is this framework try to connect financial performance to the SDG?
Okay, so let's start with the to answer the first question. So the link between ESG materiality and financial performance is in the concept of materiality as SASB defines materiality. So if an ESG issue is material for an industry, so it means that it impacts one or more value drivers. So it's material for investors, for shareholders. So it means that have an impact on financial performance. So let's say if for an industry greenhouse emission is considered material by SASB, it means that performing well in of course reducing greenhouse emission will have an impact, should have an impact on financial performance, okay? Because it has an impact on, let's say, growth rate, in this case now it's cost saving, all these kind of things. So the problem is that besides the theoretical framework, it is a theoretical framework, even if SASB defined, so in the process of the standard codification, they worked using, industry experts group and so on. So they define material issues for each industry according to expert groups of each industry and each sector. Of course, we need evidence. So does really materiality matter? So, and there is evidence. So in some papers, when I cited one, showed that companies, a portfolio of companies with companies that are best performers on ESG material issues outperform in terms of financial performance companies that are on the bottom quantile of these companies, so of material issues. So it means that being good on on those issues that are considered material for your industry pays off. Okay, so this is one thing. The other thing is what we did. So we consider SASB classification they classify 30 material issues, 30 issues, okay, general issues that are grouped in categories like they mentioned, which is environment, human capital, social capital, business model, innovation, leadership, and governance. There are 30. So what we did, we pick each of these issues and look at the definition and so go inside, and we said, okay, if a company's perform work and focuses on, let's say, greenhouse emission, because it is material, on which are the SDGs and targets that are impacted, okay? So we mapped, this is simply a mapping. We are not talking about impact investing. It is not referring to the impactability of a company and an industry with ad hoc projects. It's the impactability of a company and an industry doing that does in their current operations. Okay, assuming that the company will focus on those ESG issues that are considered material. So we have faith in SASB, of course. This is the best. So we use SASB framework. I hope I answered your question. But I went very quickly, so if you read the paper, and of course I will be more than happy to if you can write me emails, okay?
Hello, I would like to ask a general question to all our panels. About the SDGs of these corporates. I believe there are some problems of the objective variables and the subjective variables of the SDGs. And it was actually interesting to see that in Professor Cho Dong-sung's slides that Incheon was selected as one of the safest cities, because what I've heard from some of my friends who lived in Incheon says it is kind of dangerous to walk around at night. There are a lot of drunk young people, and maybe they're too indecent, and you might get beaten up by them. So there is kind of an example of, a simple example of disparities between the objective dimensions and the subjective dimensions of SDGs. So what can we do if there are these kind of disparities between them in the SDGs of these corporates? And what can be the goals for the corporates to handle these kind of disparities to improve the overall SDGs?
Let's collect a few other questions before I give a chance to the speakers to reply to you. Anybody else wants to come up with questions? Yes, please.
방금 질문하신 분, 조동성 교수님의 그 팩트를 반론을 하셨는데요. 저는
Can you restart? Can you restart?
예. 지금 이 청중 방청 하시는 분 중에 조동성 교수님의 그 인천의 안전한 도시라는 것을 반론을 하셨는데 그 반론을 반론하겠습니다. 그래서 저는 지금 2009년 이 도시가 생기면서 최초로 입주해서 지금까지 살고 있습니다. 근데 지금까지 한 번도 그 불상사 사고가 없었습니다. 그래서 그 원인은 뭐냐면 도시가 워낙 설계가 잘 돼 있고 무슨 사고를 낸 범인이 있으면 이 구역을 도피하기 전에 100% 이 체포가 되게 돼 있습니다. 그래서 여기서 사고를 엄두를 낼 엄두를 내지를 못하게 그렇게 구조 설계가 돼 있습니다. 그래서 그것을 지금 반론을 했습니다. 예.
네, 제가 지금 질문한 거는 관련이 없지만은 제가 가지고 있는 이제 이 캐파시티는 리포팅 할 때 그 리포팅 프로세스가 상당히 미스리딩이 많아서 특히 이 후진국이나 선진국이나 공통적으로 이 리포팅의 컨텐츠가 릴라이빌리티가 없고 인티그리티가 떨어지고 마찬가지로 또 이제 컨센서스를 컬렉팅하는 그런 프로세스가 굉장히 약하기 때문에 어떻게 하면은 리포팅이 진정한 의미에서 리포팅이 될 수 있을까? 특히 우리 조동선 교수님이 이제 인천대학을 저렇게 업그레이드 하시는데 업그레이드 했는 결과가 아웃풋은 리포팅이 없으면은 평가를 못하니까 그 리포팅의 릴라이어빌리티를 어떻게 높이고 계시는가? 지금까지의 릴라이어빌리티는 리포팅이 구두로 이루어지거나 또는 이 오럴로 리턴으로 이루어지거나 어떤 프로시저로 이루어지는 과정에서 메저먼트는 리포팅이 신뢰가 없으면 메저먼트가 의미가 없으니까 어떻게 하면은 국제적으로 다양한 나라에서 오셨기 때문에 리포팅의 퀄리티를 높이기 위해서 어떻게 하면 좋은 건지 제 경험에 의한다면은 리포팅이 미스리딩이 돼서 아주 이 디지털 소사이어티에서 바깥에 흘러나가는 이 그 아웃리크가 너무 많기 때문에 이걸 우리가 어떻게 프로텍션하고 이 리포팅의 릴라이빌티를 높일 수 있는가. 특히 우리 인천대학에서 리포팅의 프로시저에서 어떻게 강조를 하고 계시는가 한번 경험을 좀 나눠주셨으면 하고 기대를 합니다. 잘 돼가고 있는 우리나라 최고의 이 혁신이 일어나고 있는 대학이기 때문에 기대가 많습니다. 네.
Okay, thank you. So, yes, who wants to go first? Rodolphe, I see that you.
I think I can go. I think the different questions raise an important issue. So first, a measure is just a measure. So that means that we have to have a representation of how the world is, if there is a true world, so to speak. So that's one question. Some of us may say that the world is purely constricted. Others may say that it exists and that we observe it and we measure it. But a measure, in either case, a measure is just a measure. Doesn't mean that it gives all the truth or all the that it empties out all the content of what is supposed to measure. So that's one. The second thing is that as human beings and as societies, we need these measures to adjust our behaviors. And so the third thing is that as soon as you deliver a ranking, although the measures or measurements on which it is based could be poorly reliable, what has been observed in sociology, psychology, and other social sciences is that actually we tend to attribute value to the criteria. So it means that over the years, when you publicize a ranking of a university, of law firms or restaurants or whatever other organization you may think, people will tend to attribute truth value to these rankings. Hence, then you start having comparability across these entities. And my last point is that as soon as you have observed that people attribute truth value to the measures, which we know are just a part of the truth, organizations adjust their behaviors, and so research becomes one of the first, research outputs become one of the first objectives for universities, because ranking of universities are based on research. Quality of service will become as important as quality of food in restaurants, etc. This is what sociologists call performativity. So that means that the rankings perform the world in a different way. And so there are some, and I finish with this, I mean, there are some interesting ideas that you can unfold from that. For instance, the CAPM, so the and option models of Robert Merton 73. Yeah, can I be concise? Have been shown that actually that they were not predicting the value of the options, really. But as we started to program the computers according to the theory, what happened is that the actors' behavior ended up mimicking what the theory was predicting. So we adjust our behaviors to some of the measurements that we create.
그 인천의 안전에 대해서 재미있는 얘기들이 많이 나왔는데요. 좋은 말씀은 경험으로 이제 하셨고요. 사실 저도 경험이 있는데 이게 노트북 아닙니까? 제가 이거를 4번을 카페나 빵집 같은 데서 하다가 그냥 놓고 나왔어요. 근데 한 2-3시간 후에 그걸 알아가지고 어떡합니까? 다시 가봤거든요. 4번 다 그대로 있는 거예요, 이게. 그래서 한 번도 제가 안 읽고 이제 벌써 3년 이상 쓰고 있는데 정말 적어도 물적인 면에서의 그 도덕질이나 이런 거는 전 인천도 그렇고 한국 전체에서 사라진 것 같아요. 그런 면에서 이제 세이프인데, 근데 그게 전 사실 그 안전하다는 게 두 가지 기준인데 하나는 사람의 그 마음이나 정신이 이제 그런 걸 다 지키는 게 있고 또 하나는 제도인데 사실 좀 솔직히 아직은 아까 선생님도 말씀하셨지만 우리 제도가 안전을 보장해 주는 것 같아요. 옛날 그 조지 오웰이 1948년에 1984라는 소설 쓰면서 미래는 빅브라더가 지배할 거라고 그랬잖아요. 사실 좀 불행한 얘기지만 우리 인천은 특히 송도는 빅브라더가 지배하고 있는 도시입니다. 그러니까 정말 어떤 범죄를 일으키고 도망갈 수가 없는 도시예요, 여기가. 그래서 안전한 뜻이기 때문에 저는 그 인간의 본성이 아직 완벽하게 돼 있지는 않은 상태라는 얘기는 좀 고백해야 될 것 같고요. 근데 아까 정말 이 메저먼트에 대해서 중요한 얘기 하셨는데 또 우리 로돌프가 아주 좋은 코멘트 하셨고요. 특히 그 로돌프가 그 밸류에 대해서 얘기하셨어요. 도대체 누구의 가치관을 가지고 평가할 거냐. 저게 굉장히 중요한 얘기를 하셨다고 생각하는데 제 경우에 인천대학에서는요. 인풋의 메저먼트하고 아웃풋의 메저먼트 두 가지가 있다고 생각합니다. 그 인풋의 메저먼트는 예컨대 아까 보셨듯이 저희는 1년에 한 2천억을 좀 넘는 예산을 쓰는데 그 예산을 배분할 때 옛날엔 그냥 학교 목적, 연구나 교육을 잘할 수 있으면 거기에다 예산을 배분했는데 올해 7월부터는 학교의 목적인 연구나 교육 외에 이 인천 사회 그리고 대한민국 사회 또는 세계의 평화에 이 하나하나의 예산이 어떠한 공헌을 하느냐를 따져서 그 두 가지를 종합해서 예산을 편성한다는 얘기를 드렸습니다. 근데 이때 뭘 매조해가지고 그러니까 각 대학이나 단과대학이나 연구소에서 내년도 예산을 쓰겠다고 예산 요청을 하잖아요. 그럼 어느 게 더 우리 학교의 목적 그리고 사회 목적에 부합하는지 매저를 해야 됩니다. 측정을 해야 됩니다. 근데 그거 쉽지 않아요. 그래서 저희는 어떻게 했냐면 지금까지는 사실은 기획예산처장이 전권을 가지고 예컨대 우리 학교에도 이제 국회에 해당하는 게 있으니까 기획예산처장은 기재부고 그다음에 우리 뭐 평의위원회나 이런 교무연구위원회는 국회죠. 그 기재부나 그런 국회에 잘 보이면 예산을 받게 돼 있었어요. 그래서 우린 그걸 없애고 이제부터는 그러한 힘 있는 기관이 없이 평가만 해놓은 다음에 그걸 숫자로 측정하고 하는 거는 위원회를 만드는데 위원회는 조교수, 부교수, 정교수의 숫자가 있습니다. 우리 한 25%, 30%, 40% 이렇게 되는데 그 숫자만큼 난수표를 돌려가지고 랜덤을 해서 교수님들을 모셔서 그 위원회에서 평가를 하게. 그래서 적어도 어떤 특정 개인이나 어떤 영향력을 가진 그런 위원회가 아니라 정말 우리 구성원들이 누구든지 공평하게 참여해가지고 측정을 할 수 있는 그런 방식을 인풋에 측정해서 쓰고 있고요. 그다음에 아웃풋의 측정. 다시 말해 그런 예산을 써가지고 어떤 교육 효과, 연구 효과, 그다음에 이 지역사회나 국가사회에 큰 공헌을 했느냐. 그거는 이제 정성적 평가가 있고 정량적 평가가 있잖아요. 정량적 평가는 쉬운데 이제 정성적 평가가 쉽지 않습니다. 그래서 결국 이거는 결국 스테이크홀더의 그러니까 이해관계자의 평가에 할 수밖에 없는데 저는 사실 2년 총장 업무를 끝낸 다음에 우리 교수님들하고 직원 선생님한테서 평가를 받았어요. 저는 그런 평가가 내부 인터널 스테이크홀더, 내부의 이해관계자의 평가로 중요하다고 생각합니다. 근데 사실은 학교라는 건 내부의 구성원을 위해서 존재하는 것만은 아니에요. 우리 교수님이나 직원 선생님, 학생들도 중요하지만 사실 우리 국가사회를 위해서 또는 이 학생들이 취업하는 기업이나 기관을 위해서 필요한 거니까 그런 외부 사회 평가도 받아야죠. 그래서 저는 지금 내년에는 제가 평가받을 때는 우리 집행부가 평가받을 때는 내부의 교수, 학생, 직원 선생님 물론이고 이 지역사회 평가를 받고 싶어요. 근데 지역사회 300만이 평가할 수는 없잖아요. 그걸 대변하는 기관이 신문기자, 언론기관이 아닐까 하는 생각이 들어가지고 인천시의 언론사로 하여금 평가를 해주면 어떨까 하는 지금 생각을 하고 있고요. 또는 뭐 여기 지역사회 또 어떤 그 시민단체들 있잖아요. 그런 단체의 어떤 표준 그 그룹을 만들어
Excuse
가지고
me.
평가를
Can
하려는
I-
그 정도.
Right.
I'm
Yeah,
done.
Sorry but to interrupt, but
그런 식으로 이제
we
평가를 하려고
really
합니다.
are running out of time. Thank you. Susie, you want to come in?
I'll just take a very quick moment to reflect on the fact that the gentleman's question was kind of proved by the discussion that then followed, that both objective and subjective measures are very important. We find this when we're looking at individuals. We want to know if you feel healthy, but also if you're actually healthy. And you've seen what it can do in this room. But I think the same is also true of business. When there were some slides, perhaps it was with you earlier, Rudy. There was in the previous session we talked about what business is doing and what business is perceived to be doing, and so it's the same at that firm level as well. So I think both are important, so I'll just make that comment.
So much. Healy, do you want to come in or no? Do you feel like?
I can say something really quickly.
Sure.
Just in regards to the bigger question of how to combat discrepancy in subjectivity and objectivity. And I think it is connected to how do you raise the reliability of reporting. And it builds on something Dong Sung was saying in regards to qualitative information. And I would just like to say that sometimes we get really focused on measures as being an indicator or a statistic or a metric. And in fact, that's just one type of knowledge. And so if we think about the fact that it is statistics, knowledge, and policy, and we encourage multiple ways of creating knowledge, of course, evidence-based knowledge, but some of those which can be derived qualitatively, and there's emerging social impact measurement practices which do this, which look at measurement as participatory, as interpretive, as a collection of an inclusivity of voices. And of course, social science research has for a long time also developed rigorous ways of analyzing and presenting that qualitative information. And I believe somehow mixing methods and looking at broader forms of knowledge can help us raise the reliability, because we have captured the experiences of people saying that they are impacted positively in their well-being, that it's not just a statement made by an indicator, but legitimately they do feel safer or not. But the fact that you can raise the fact that people do and do not feel safe allows you to continue to have the conversation until people do feel safe. And that, in the end, will be what raises the reliability and the impact of the reporting. Thanks.
Very, very quick comment about the reporting. Yes, of course, the reliability of the information is relevant, but the reliability of the information report is relevant not only for the ESG. This is a problem and an issue, the reliability of also financial information. For non-financial information, 2 points. One, it is necessary that non-financial information disclosure should become mandatory. We cannot rely on sustainability reports. We have companies with beautiful sustainability reports, tons of pages and so on, but if you ask to CFOs, now the proportion is increasing, but 5 years ago, asking to CFOs, okay, what is ESG? And CSR, let's say, what? I don't know. So everything was in the hand of the sustainability CSR manager, sustainability manager, we can call about that. So they do the small project in the small village, and so that's all. But this is not the way to have real societal impact. So this is one way. So we need to bring the ESG and SDGs into the board, at the board level. So first of all, mandatory disclosure and then harmonization. This is another problem. So disclosure, I think it is the key issue. Also my model, okay, my framework, without a good disclosure doesn't work. Okay, so when we put numbers. So everything is, I think it is really the center of the debate is the quality of disclosure. So thanks for your question, really, thank you.
Hey, thank you. So, well, I think this particularly these two last comments about the importance of disclosure and harmonization, I think are going to be key to inform, in fact, the next steps of the OECD's project on measuring inputs of businesses on inclusive growth, well-being, and sustainability. Thanks a lot for having provided very, very complementary perspectives on these issues. I thought it was a very rich discussion, and thank you
as well from those of you from the floor that have contributed. So thank you to the speakers and to the public. Thank you.